Hi everyone, we're Australian National Department of Young Scholarly Researchers. Our five members will provide critical analysis of five key aspects by developing a profile presentation for Australia films, which may be looking to expect into the United Kingdom. First, we need to have a basic understanding of the UK background. The UK is a high-income, service-dominated economy with a long-standing democratic tradition and common law system. It has long played a central role in global trade and finance, with London standing as one of the world's leading financial hubs. However, events like Brexit and broader global shocks such as COVID-19 and the Ukraine war, which have reshaped its international standing, forcing business to proactively address both emerging opportunities and lingering uncertainties. For our presentation, to help Australian films successfully expand into the UK's market, we will cover the five aspects below, including determining ways of influencing the UK's political economic by globalization and specific challenges presented by the UK's legal system to these Australia films. First. Second, the level of UK's economic development level and human development level and the most important measures for these Australian films. Third, assessing the cultural distance between the UK and Australia. Fourth, these films specific industries specialization trading with the UK and Australia. Finally, current trade policy instruments employed by UK government and corresponding theory support, and what this means for Australian films considering entry into the UK market. Let's start with the big picture. Globalization has had a profound impact on the UK, trading nations, and financial hubs. The UK really explains both the opportunities and the tensions that come with global integration. First, let's talk about political system. The UK has long been embedded in global institutions like the WTO and the NATO and until Brexit, the European Union. These memberships tie domestic policy to international standards, but at the same time, globalization has triggered political backlash. Brexit is the clearest example, where concerns about sovereignty and national control pushed the UK to leave the EU. This links to Danny Roderick's globalization trilemma, which says you can't maximize democracy, sovereignty, and global integration all at once. In the post-Brexit era, the UK has to balance global commitments with domestic independence, something made harder by global shocks like COVID-19 and the war in Ukraine. Next, the economic system. Globalization has reinforced London's status as one of the world's leading financial centers. Liberalized capital markets and foreign investments have supported growth in finance, consulting, and digital technologies. But it hasn't been smooth. Manufacturing has declined due to international competition, and the gap between prosperous London and struggling North regions has widened. So while globalization has boosted innovation and open markets, it also has exposed the UK to economic volatility and inequality. Third, the legal system. Here, globalization has pushed the UK to align with international standards. Intellectual property protection is strong, backed by frameworks like TRIPS, the common law system, which Australia also shares, gives predictability in contracts. but it can be complex and costly to navigate. At the same time, new areas of law have emerged, such as data protection under UK GDPR, rules for e-commerce, and environmental regulations. Overall, the UK's legal framework is both a stress and a challenge. It's transparent, but compliance is demanding. So, what does this mean for Australia films? On the positive side, the UK's familiar legal system and open market are attractive, but there are challenges too. Post-Brexit regulatory change creates uncertainty. Market entry is limited in sensitive sectors like defense and energy. Compliance with labor, tax, and environmental law can be expensive. And although intellectual property is well protected, enforcement can take time and money. So let's welcome Queenie to speak question two.
Thanks, Jiahua, for analyzing globalization's impact on the United Kingdom. WTO and NATO integration, post-Brexit sovereignty tensions, London's financial role, regional imbalances, and Aussie firms' regulatory uncertainties. Building on that, I will talk about the UK's economic development level and the human development level, and why human capital indicators are most pivotal for Australian firms that make spend into the UK. First, assessing the UK's economic development needs a multi-dimensional framework, as it cannot rely on single indicators alone. In 2023, the UK's gross national income per capita hit $45,000, rising to $48,000 after purchasing power parity adjustment and ranking top 20 globally. Besides, its 2024 gross domestic product grew just 0.1% year-on-year, with the service sector making up 80% of GDP, financial services contributing 12%, and high-end manufacturing accounting for 28% of industrial output. Moreover, Social Security spending accounts for 21% of GDP, highlighting consumption and the industrial foundation of its high-income market. Yet, imbalances exist. The shadow economy focuses on retail and consumption is around 8% of GDP. The disposable income of the richest 10% is 5 times that of the poorest 10%. And Northern England's 5.2% unemployment is 1.8 percentage points higher than London's. This shows multidimensional assessment is key for Australian firms to grasp UK market details. Second, as for UK's human development, we can evaluate through the resource-based value recommended by Hill and his research teams, highlighting human capital as a core source of a competitive advantage. We use the Human Development Index, Social Progress Index, and the Gender Equity measures to measure it. In 2023, the UK's HDI was 0.925, ranking 75th globally, with 13.5 average years of schooling and 500,000 annual science, technology, energy, engineering, mathematics graduates, 42% of whom possess cross-enterprise skills. Its SPI ranks 10th globally, with social inclusion score 0.81 and gender equity index 0.78. Besides, UK STEM female graduates make up 38%, 5 percentage points above the average. For example, Australian biotech firm Commonwealth Serum Laboratories set up a research and development center in Cambridge for STEM talent, cutting training costs by 30%. Meanwhile, the National Health Service also keeps employee absenteeism at 4.1%, compared to the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development's 6.2%. Which validates the value of human capital. Finally, for Australian firms expanding into the UK, HDI-derived human capital indicators matters more than the economic ones, which can be supported by Duling's ownership, location, and internalization paradigm and research. Hill and his research team notes ownership, location, and internalization's location advantage focuses on factor quality, with human capital as its core carrier. As a study in international business studies focusing on 200 Australian firms shows UK investment returns correlate 0.68 with university graduate share and 0.72 with STEM talent stock versus 0.32 with GDP growth. It explains that Rhino Tunnel chose London for its low carbon art research and development center, as London has 4 times more mining carbon composite talents than Manchester, and from the data derived from Takagaki's article in the Global Strategy Journal, it further aids human capital's irreplaceability, boosts a long-term return on equity by 50 to 20%. In contrast, an Australian firm that chose to expand to northern UK in 2021 faced a 30% skills gap and 25% higher cost. Thus, human capital metrics are more decisive for Australian firms in UK long-terms, the profitability. In summary, my analysis shows that the UK's economy reveals its structural strengths and imbalances. Besides, its human development highlights human capital serves as a competitive asset. And for Australian firms, human capital indicators are key to investment decisions. It is worth noting, however, that human capital advantages also require alignment with the local cultural context. Next, please welcome Shi Rui, who will draw on analyzing how cultural distance between the UK and Australia specifically impacts business operations using different theories.
Hi. Earlier we looked at the UK's economic and human developments, which give us some picture of the market, but number alone are not enough. What else matters is culture, so now I will explain the cultural distance between the UK and Australia using 3 theories. Hofstadter cultural dimensions, the co-curricle of cultural distance, and cultural cluster sources. For the Hofstadter cultural dimension, the power distance mean is how many inequality is kept. The UK accepts hierarchies more, with Australia prefer equality. For example, UK boss often stand quiet in meetings, but Australia speak up. And for the uncertainty avoidance, the mean is tolerance of risk. The UK is more flexible and willing to adjust, with Australia prefer clear rules and plans. And next part is masculinities and femininities. Competition varies quality of life. The UK is more competitive with long hours, but Australia's value work like life balance. And for the long term and short term, focus on the future versus present. The UK planned more long time, whereas Australia are more short time and programmatic. And another one is indulgence and resistance. How many people enjoy life, both and indulgent, with poor travel and hobbies command. And the next is individualize and collectivize. The main is personal and group goals. Both are highly individualistic, so contract and reviews are based on individual, not term. And those differences seem small, but affect leadership, negotiations, and teamwork. Your and Clark Jago remind us that we should not rely on the national average, to develop some system to measure value at the individual levels, showing the people within some countries can also be very different. And for the next series, is the concept of cultural distance itself. Shakis agreeing the source cultures as the fact distance is misleading because it assumes things like symmetry, stabilities, and more distance also mean more problem. In reality, even close countries like the UK and Australia can have an impact of frictions. For example, the British prefer the more formal communications, but Australia are more direct and cross and decreed rather than distance. It is matter to think of cultural difference as a fraction. The mean like sometimes creates challenges, but sometimes also creates opportunities. And finally, cultural collector system. The UK and Australia both belong to oligos clusters, one of the most cohesive group in the world. This explains their high similarities in the values, but being the some clusters didn't not mean are identical. The UK still retain tradition like the maniaxis and class system. So in the cinemas, Hofrist shows that different and cities reference cultural as functions and class series explain the closeness, but also divergence. For Australia firm, the UK is earlier to enter the many other markets, but success still requires adapt to those cultures and culture is not separate. It strongly interest with industries. Next, my teammate will discuss how this factor plays out in Australia industry environment.
Building on the earlier parts of our presentation, I will answer a critical question. Which industry should the United Kingdom specialize in when it trades with other countries? I will apply Adam Smith's idea of absolute advantage and David Ricardo's idea of comparative advantage. Then I will make a clean recommendation for UK trade policy. First, Adam Smith's absolute advantage. Smith's logic is direct. A country should specialize where it is most productive in absolute terms. In the UK, 3 sectors stand out: financial and professional services. London coordinates complex finance, insurance, legal, and consulting work. This service rely on deep skills, trusted institutions, and global networks. Productivity is high, and spillover support many other activities. Aerospace. Companies like Rolls-Royce and BAE Systems sit at the cutting edge of aerospace. The sector competes on precision, safety, and design, not on low-cost inputs. It is built on advanced engineering and rigorous quality control. Pharmaceuticals and life science. Companies like GSK link world-class research with regulated manufacturing. Strong university and clinical travel capacity allow the UK to convert science into high-value experts. So, under Smith, the mastery is simple. The UK should specialize in knowledge-intensive, high-productivity sectors, where it already shows global leadership. Now, David Ricardo, comparative advantage. Ricardo asked a different question. Well, is the opportunity cost the lowest? Even if a country is not the best at everything, it gains by focusing on what it gives up least to produce. The UK this points to services and high-value niches. Services, financial, law, accounting, consulting, and design carry high domestic value added. They move across borders through people, contrast, and platform. Research showed that advanced economics such as the UK hold a revolt comparative advantage in services and benefit from deep participation in global value chains. This supports the view that services are a relative strength, not only an absolute one. Creative industries. Film, television, music, advertising, and gaming turn skills into learned person property into scalable experts. They scale through content for mass and licensing rather than large factories. The UK's language, talent, and brands help here. Premium brand goals. Scotch whisky and Scottish salmon use strong reputation and protected names to sell a higher price. They face less pressure from low-cost rivals and feed the UK focus on quality. Under Richardo, the UK should not chase standardized, labor-intensive manufacturing. The opportunity cost is too high because it would draw capital and talent away from service, science, and creative work where the UK earns more per unit of effort. Which theory should guide UK policy? Follow Richardo comparative advantage. The case is simple. The UK is service lead, so it learned direct scale skill and capital to the highest return. Services and IP experts are more resilient, moving via digital delivery, licensing, and investment. And post-Brexit governance gaps make a clean ankle useful, keeping focus on high DVA services and knowledge experts. In practice, shape trade deals around service digital trade, data flow, and recognition of qualifications, backlight science and creative hooks, glow London green violence, and invest in people, faster AI use, digital security, and trusted standardized. To conclude, Smith highlights the UK absolute strengths. Richardo captures its relative strengths, and given today's structure and risks, Richardo is better guide. Next, my another teammate will cover the UK's current trade policy instrument and the trade theory they support.
Okay, thank you for your presentation. Next, I will talk about the specific trade policy tools currently employed by the UK government. So first is the UK global tariff. Its primary purpose is to bridge the gap with EU market post-Brexit. So which means reducing or eliminating tariff on low yield goods while simplifying the tariff structure to provide easier market access for developing countries. So the second one is the free trade agreement. Since Brexit, imports from the EU have decreased by 24% or 28%, while exports to non-EU countries have been less affected and may even benefit. So imports from the non-EU region have not experienced the significant negative impact. So this is a symbolize the provide developing countries with the easier market access for developing countries. Okay, next about the series. So there are two primary theories supporting trade policy. So the first is a David Ricardo theory of the comparative advantage. So this theory suggests that trade arises from different in countries' productive capacity. For instance, when Britain exchanged 100 worth of the cloth for French lace, the lace acquired exceed its domestic production capacity, and demonstrating the benefit of the trade. And similarly, when Britain traded the time mine for French wine, the quantity of the wine obtained was double its domestic grape output. So, also clearly proving the significant trade gains. Okay, the second theory is Paul Krugman. So about this theory is a new trade theory, so which is considered that trade is driven not only by the comparative advantage, but also by the economic of scale, imperfect competition, and the product differentiation. So for instance, the textile industry share declined from the 68% in the 1840 to the 39% before the World War I. So replaced by the other manufacturing whose share increased from the 25% in the 1870 to the 43% between the 1925 and the 1933. So through the economic of the scale and the expansion into the new industries,
the Britain secured more favorable terms of the trade in global markets, unlike cotton textile. The Britain later developing manufacturing sector, such as machinery and chemicals. So this is the field domestic substitute within an architectural economic. So this industry is often operated within oligopolistic market structure where firm lacked incentive to dramatically reduce the price. So when cost fell, a stark contrast to textile. As a result, the British export price remained relatively stable or even increased, so thereby improving its terms of the trade. So in the end, the globalization has made the change the UK a lot. It's made the UK strong in finance and service. But Brexit also brought new problem. So for Australian companies, the UK is still a good choice. The law system is familiar and the talent is strong, but you and the cost can be a challenge. So the UK and Australia are closed, but the small difference still matter in business. So overall, the UK has both chance and risks. Success depends on being prepared and adapting well. Okay, and the next is our reference. Okay, that's all. Thank you.